What if UConn didn't bring Nykesha Sales back primarily to teach scoring? Because forget her 2,178 career points per second. The number that should terrify opposing guards is 447, and that is still the most career steals by any player in UConn history. And now Sales is joining a Huskies team that already forced 24.1 turnovers per game last season. So here's the real question. Can the greatest ball thief in UConn history somehow make an already suffocating defense even more disruptive?
Prime Field!
Let's establish something immediately. Nykesha Sales is not walking into a defensive rebuild. UConn went 38-1 last season. Opponents averaged only 50.4 points per game, shot 33.5% from the floor, and just 27% from three. The Huskies forced 24.1 turnovers per game, averaged 15.6 steals, and converted those mistakes into 32.5 points off turnovers every night. That is ridiculous. So the debate isn't, can Nykesha Sales make UConn good defensively? They're already good. The debate is whether she can make their aggression smarter. Can UConn pressure harder without fouling more? Can they turn more deflections into live ball steals? Can they create better transition opportunities instead of simply piling up turnover statistics? And most importantly, can we actually measure a legitimate Nykesha Sales effect once the season begins? Because UConn has one of the most interesting collections of defensive guards in America, and each one gives Sales a completely different problem to solve. Start with KK Arnold. If there is one returning guard who already looks like she was built for this conversation, it's Arnold. She finished last season with 102 steals, in 38 games, 2.68 per game. Among UConn's returning guards, nobody came close to her volume, but here's where this becomes interesting. Arnold committed 61 personal fouls, which works out to 2.62 fouls per 40 minutes. Her steal-to-foul ratio was 1.67. That is already strong. So Sales shouldn't necessarily be asking Arnold to gamble more. The bigger opportunity might be making those gambles more selective. There's a difference between disruption and chaos. Great pressure defense isn't reaching every possession. It's recognizing when the ball handler is exposed, when the dribble gets too high, when somebody turns their shoulders, when the passing angle becomes predictable. Sales built an entire playing career around anticipation. Now imagine Arnold maintaining those 100-plus steal numbers while becoming even more disciplined behind the play. That could be terrifying, but, and this is important, there's currently no public evidence that Sales has been assigned specifically to redesign Arnold's defensive technique. That part is projection. The numbers simply tell us Arnold is the most obvious player to monitor, and Arnold isn't actually the most fascinating case. That might be Kayleigh Heckel. Kayleigh Heckel had 56 steals last season in only 18.7 minutes per game. That is a real defensive activity. But she also committed 65 fouls. Her foul rate, 3.56 per 40 minutes, highest among UConn's regular returning guard rotation. Her steal-to-foul ratio is only 0.86, and this is exactly why simply saying Sales will make UConn more aggressive misses the point. UConn does not need every guard flying into passing lanes like they're trying to break the steals record. Sometimes the improvement is doing less. Better closeout angles, better containment, knowing when to trap and when to stay home, recognizing whether help is actually behind you before you attack the ball. If Heckel gets the same disruption with fewer fouls, that might be a bigger defensive improvement than adding another half steal per game. Because UConn already forces turnovers, the next evolution is efficiency. And that brings us to maybe the cleanest defensive profile in this entire guard group. Ashlynn Shade quietly produced one of the most interesting defensive stat lines on the roster. She had 69 steals while committing only 49 fouls. That comes to just 1.87 fouls per 40 minutes. Her steal-to-foul ratio was 1.41. And against Xavier on January 28th, she exploded for a career-high 9 steals. 9! That tells you there is legitimate playmaking instinct there, and Shade represents the exact balance UConn should be chasing. Aggressive enough to create turnovers, controlled enough not to constantly compromise the defense. Now here's where Sales becomes fascinating, not because we know she's giving Shade some secret defensive assignment. We don't. but because Sales herself became historically productive at stealing the basketball without being remembered as some reckless gambler. That distinction matters. The question for Shade could become, can she go from being a solid secondary disruptor to someone offenses actually have to scheme around? And then you add Allie Ziebell. Ziebell had only 37 steals, but she committed just 30 fouls, giving her the lowest foul rate of this returning group at 1.71 per 40. So there is room to become more aggressive. That's the chess game. Arnold may need refinement, Heckel may need restraint, Shade might need expansion, Ziebell might need permission. Sales doesn't necessarily need to teach all four guards the same thing. She may simply help each one understand when disruption is worth the risk. Then you reach the players where the sample gets much less certain. Kelis Fisher played only 173 minutes as a freshman. She had 9 steals and 13 fouls. That translates to 3.01 fouls per 40, but the sample is way too small to confidently label her as foul-prone. What matters is what happens when her minutes grow. Now, does her athleticism create real pressure? Can she defend without immediately getting into foul trouble? Can she become another change-of-pace defender Gino throws into games when UConn wants to turn up the temperature? Then there's Morgan Cheli. Cheli missed the entire 2025-26 season after dealing with an ankle injury, so we have no current season defensive sample. But she is 6'2". That size on the perimeter gives UConn possibilities. Could she become a switchable defender? Could she bother bigger wings? Could her length become useful in traps? Absolutely. But again, those are possibilities, not reported plans. And that distinction is critical with this entire Sales conversation. Nobody at UConn has publicly said, Nykesha Sales has arrived and she's installing a new press. That would be overstating it. What we actually have is something more interesting. One of the best turnover-producing defenses in America, adding the greatest steals player in program history to its coaching staff. Now we get to watch what changes. And this might be the most important part of the entire debate. If we want to know whether Sales actually changes this defense, we cannot just look at steals per game. UConn already averaged 15.6. If they average 16.1 next season, does that prove anything? Not necessarily. I'd track 4 categories on film. Number 1, point of attack pressure. Did the defender directly force the ball handler into the mistake? Number 2, passing lane disruption, interceptions, deflections, weak side digs. Number 3, press and trap creation. Turnovers generated before the opponent even gets comfortably into its offense. And number 4, help and post-stunt turnovers. Guards digging down, rotating from the nail, or creating interceptions after doubles. That tells us where the turnovers are coming from, but even that doesn't tell us whether the pressure is actually producing value. For that, there is one statistic I care about more than everything else. 24.1 turnovers, 15.6 steals, 32.5 points off turnovers. UConn scored 32.5 points per game off turnovers last season. That's the benchmark, not just whether you forced the mistake. What did you do with it? Because a dead ball turnover that leads to a 5-on-5 possession is different from Arnold ripping somebody at a half court and creating a 2-on-1. So I want to track, how many turnovers are live ball turnovers? How many directly produce transition chances? How many points does UConn score immediately afterward? And equally important, what happens when the pressure fails? Because aggressive defense always has a price. If Arnold jumps a passing lane and misses, what shot does UConn surrender? If Heckel traps and the opponent splits it, is somebody giving up an open corner 3? UConn allowed only 33.5% shooting overall and 27% from 3 last season. You cannot destroy that elite half-court structure just to chase another 2 steals every night. That's why the real Sales effect might actually look boring on the box score. Similar turnover numbers, similar steal numbers, but fewer guard fouls, cleaner rotations, more live ball turnovers, and more points immediately after those turnovers. So that would be improvement. So here's my prediction. I don't think Nykesha Sales walks into stores and suddenly turns UConn into some completely different defensive team. Why would she? This group already forced 24 turnovers per game. I think the change will be smaller and potentially more dangerous. Arnold becomes slightly more selective. Heckel becomes slightly more disciplined. Shade becomes slightly more aggressive away from the ball. Ziebell starts turning our low foul rate into more disruption. Fisher gets a bigger defensive test. Cheli gives UConn another long perimeter body once she's fully back. And when you combine all of those tiny gains, suddenly an elite defense becomes harder to attack without looking dramatically different. Sales was hired on August 3rd, 2026, after 10 seasons as a Division I assistant at UCF in Georgia. She's not returning to UConn simply as a famous former player. She returns with actual coaching experience and a defensive resume that is impossible to ignore. 447 career steals, 143 in a single season, and 2 big East Defensive Player of the Year awards. The scary part isn't UConn learning how to create turnovers. They already know how. The scary part is somebody like Nykesha Sales helping them understand exactly which turnovers are worth hunting. And that gives us the experiment I want to track all season. Not, did UConn steal the ball more? Ask this instead. Did the Huskies force roughly the same number of turnovers while committing fewer guard fouls, giving up fewer breakdowns, and creating more immediate offense? Because if that happens, then we might actually be looking at the Nykesha Sales effect. Subscribe, because once UConn starts playing, we're going to track Arnold, Heckel, Shade, Ziebell, Fisher, and Cheli against this exact defensive baseline. And drop your answer below. Which UConn guard do you think benefits the most defensively from Nykesha Sales? KK Arnold, Kayleigh Heckel, Ashlynn Shade, Allie Ziebell, Kelis, Fisher, or Morgan Cheli?
Prime Field.